At 8:41 a.m., my badge beeped red and a visitor sticker hit my lapel while my daughter-in-law, now boss, whispered, "We don't keep relics here. 66 years teach you to hold your center." I noted the time breathed once and refused to shrink. Then I did what builders do. I hit record, captured the QR on the big screen, and started a paper trail that talks louder than any microphone. That was only the first hinge in a week where facts outwalked whispers and dignity outlasted noise. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. The badge reader blinked red twice as if it were shaking its head at me. I swiped again. Another red glare, another little denial beep that carried all the way across the marble lobby. The receptionist's eyes lifted before her smile did. "Ma'am, your badge isn't in the system." She peeled a visitor sticker from a roll and pressed it over my lapel, fast and neat like closing a file. I noted the time, 8:41 a.m., and the terminal ID stamped on the reader. Habit. 30 years of operations taught me to mark the small things, time-place device. The elevator chime doors yawning open to swallow a crowd I used to lead. I stepped in with them, watching the red sticker catch in the brushed steel, my name reduced to a barcode I didn't scan. A woman behind me whispered simply, fell silent when I turned. I faced the doors and breathed through the sting. I was not there to beg. I was there to see. The corridor to the auditorium was longer than I remembered. Glass on the right, posters on the left, quarterly lines smiling at me like polite strangers. I kept my spine straight and my pace even. Posture is the first language of power. Footsteps gathered behind me, then parted a stream splitting around a stone. My reflection drifted in the glass white hair pinned low, navy jacket visitor printed across my heart. A door opened ahead and chatter leaked out budget launches rumor. I clicked my pen and wrote the minute mark in my notebook, 8:47. The ink steadied my hand more than breath did. I walked through the corridor of eyes and just let them say what they would inside their heads. Inside, the lights were down and the projector washed the stage in corporate dawn. An HR voice welcomed everyone and pointed to a QR code bright enough to brand a wall. For details on today's restructuring, she said, "Scan the code." I lifted my phone and waited for the square to lock. A page opened with a blue header, Legacy Consulting Sunset. I scrolled feeling nothing, and then an unmistakable chill. My name led the list, bolded fat as a stamp. I pressed the volume button to capture a silent screenshot, then another wider. I copied the URL path into my notes, a habit I once taught new hires. A few rows ahead, shoulders tensed and screens glowed. A man I hired in 04 half-turned and stopped. The HR voice kept going, careful, oiled, practiced. I opened page info, noted server, and timestamp and wrote both. The deck title matched the slug staged, not spontaneous. The hour was chosen. Shayna slid into the seat beside me as if it had always been hers. Her perfume arrived first, citrus and ambition. She leaned without looking at me and let a whisper fall just loud enough to travel. "Here we don't keep relics." I watched the stage, not her, and let the words find their shelf. Then I lifted my phone and framed the list with the time bar visible, the battery, the tiny carrier name, the small truth that proves the larger one. The screenshot caught the curl of her smile in the black edge of my screen. I saved it and wrote the minute. No speech without paper. The room hummed, soft. I chose the back center row beneath the camera dome, where sound behaves and angles favor the boring. I wrote the deck title, slide count, and QR endpoint into my notebook left margin block letters. Details calm me. They tend to misbehave only when no one writes them down. The dome's indicator blinked a steady green. Good. Someone would have a clean record of the room. I aligned my pen along the spiral and set a rule for myself, said it silently, like prayer. No speech without documents. I had learned it the hard way once upon a decade when words blown into air came back twisted and thin. This time I would collect the air first, weigh it, and label it before anyone called it mine. Right. I photographed the slide again, this time wider to include heads, shoulders, and the blue wash of the projector on the ceiling. Context is a witness. A junior brushed past my seat and, without meeting my eyes, gave my hand the smallest squeeze, a pulse that said, "I see you." She pulled away as quickly as she came when she noticed the sticker on my lapel. It's remarkable how adhesive can change a person's gravity. I took one more shot angling so the visitor label sat in the frame with the QR code and saved it to a folder I named simply Today. Then I muted notifications and set phone to vibrate. A vibration arrived anyway. HR automailer, subject line severance, plus NDA review within 24 hours to ensure continuity of health coverage. I let the subject sit on the lock screen like a sealed envelope. No hurry. Paper should never be opened in a rush, especially when it wants you to move quickly. I locked the phone again and slid it face down on my notebook like a coaster under a glass I didn't order. Across the aisle, someone exhaled loudly, and sound felt like a cue to panic. I chose not to. I smoothed the visitor sticker with my palm until the edges lay flat. I glanced at my watch, 9:23, and wrote the number. The clock in my head began its quiet count, not a race, but a ledger. Time evidence names and words would go in and something clear would come out. I looked up at the ceiling dome and imagined the file number it would wear by afternoon. I am not a relic, I thought. I am the record. That thought steadied my breath as the room shifted to the next slide and I opened my notebook to a fresh line. I pressed the sticker more, felt the paper warm under hand, and started my clock. I don't sign fear, I sign paper. I step into a quiet corridor off the Galleria lobby and tap the recorder on my phone until the red dot glows. This is Darlene, September 15th, 10:05 a.m., calling HR about the NDA tied to health coverage. The wall clock clicks like a patient metronome. My badge lanyard lies coiled in my palm like a small, tame snake. Sherry from HR picks up on the second ring. I keep my voice level. You emailed an NDA with a 24-hour deadline. I need clarity on COBRA and deadlines before I sign anything. The red dot blinks. I breathe through my nose and let the silence work for me. Company process, Sherry says, smooth as a showroom floor. Signing, she explains, helps ensure a seamless transition. I stop her gently. Please cite the policy number that says coverage hinges on executing your NDA. Silence, then, a reshuffle of words. Our understanding is coverage can be delayed without the executed document. My pen is already moving in my ops notebook, policy fournir statute timeline. Which statute, I ask? Another pause. A throat clear, I can hear over the line. I can circle back with the team. Good, I say, and make a small box in the margin labeled proof. I open the PDF while she stays on the line. Clause by clause, the paper shows its teeth. Non-disparagement, no rehire, global release, confidentiality. A countdown clock, respond within 24 hours. I read the headings aloud for the record, then quote the parts that matter. Section 3B, non-disparagement indefinite. Section 5, release of claims. Global. Section 8, deadline of 24 hours. I ask the one question any grandmother understands. Why is a medical continuity question bundled with a gag order standard language, she says, for whom I ask? The corridor answers with air alone. Since paper leaves a trail, let's use paper, I tell her. I dictate as I type. Please confirm in writing that COBRA or any continuation of coverage is not contingent on signing your NDA. Provide the policy citation and relevant statutes. Respond by end of day. I CC myself and a neutral archive account, then save the message and attachments into a new folder, HR 09-15-2025. The sent mail ping is a small, satisfying chime. You'll receive that request shortly, I say. Please reply in writing. Understood. She says, professional again now that the recorder has more to eat than our voices. In the garage, the air smells like rubber and heat, even though it's still morning. As I unlock my car, a muted preview slides across my phone. Refresh legacy meeting notes updated. The words land like a draft from a room I'm not in. I don't tap it. I take a screenshot before it fades and rename the file right there. Hint refresh 10:10 p.m. No conclusions, just evidence. I file it in today's folder and sit until my breathing matches the engine's soft idle. Through the windshield, the tower glass throws my reflection back at me, visitor sticker memory and all, and I decide it will not be the last word. Home turns into a war room when you label it. At the kitchen counter in Memorial, I fan out manila folders, NDA, Cobra badge, access slides, QR emails. A Sharpie bleeds the date across each tab. I set my old chipped mug beside a pocket recorder from my operations days and test the mic check before placing it on a coaster. A laminated checklist slides from the drawer like an old friend time. Source, evidence, witness. I print today's header on a fresh page and write the first line, 10 a.m. HR call begins. Evidence is humble work. It likes corners squared and names spelled out. The stakes aren't theoretical at 66. I open my pill organizer and feel the weight of routine, blood pressure, statin, multivitamin. Premium notices sit in a neat stack under a magnet on the fridge. I say it clearly for the mic because clarity is a spine. Coverage is life at my age. I will not sign a gag order to receive what the law already provides. I add a short list to the folder primary care cardiology pharmacy refill dates. I slide in last year's explanation of benefits with the corners trimmed so it fits. Ordinary things can be leverage when you know where to place them. I set a 24-hour timer on my phone and label it HR written confirmation due. The zeros lock into place like teeth on a gear. Into the recorder, I dictate next steps. Pick up printer ink, extra paper, spare SD card. Hard copies of the slides if possible. I write a sticky note for my purse and put the purse by the door. No magical solutions, only errands. A chime announces new mail and auto-acknowledgement, promising review by the appropriate team. I forward it to myself and add a remark to the log acknowledged. No substance. I seal each folder with a clip and line them like place settings along the counter. The house hums with refrigerator and air conditioning, but the louder thing is the timer in my head. I press my thumb to the recorder's stop button, breathe, and start a new file labeled cleanly NDA call Oslers Part 2. My hands are steady. The oven clock marks the minutes whether I watch or not. I stack the shopping list with my coupons, and in the small quiet between tasks, I feel the calm that comes only after the first move has been made. I back up the audio to my breadbox drive and jot the call time, because memory can wobble, but paper does not. Dignity, like evidence, prefers dates. The house is quiet, the timer is loud, and the only thing left to do is feed a printer until it coughs up the truth. By 8:13, the old printer finally stirred a tired hum under the kitchen light. I slid a fresh ream into the tray and steadied the stack with my palm. My phone sat face up beside it, the red dot on the recorder glowing like a small oath. Okta sign-in logs first export save as PDF timestamp spoken into the mic. Then finance ledger snapshots, export print staple. I called out each file name the way I used to call roll at morning stand-ups. Badge access next. The door reader times mirrored my spiral notebook where I'd written terminal IDs at the office. The room smelled faintly of toner and lemon soap. Outside, Memorial was quiet. Inside, the machine warmed to my rhythm. This was not rage. This was inventory. Paper doesn't shout it remembers, and I intended to make it remember me. Now. Oh, the hallway between kitchen and study felt longer than it ever had. I carried the first warm stack like a tray and passed the hall mirror. The visitor sticker I'd flattened at the office had left a faint tack on my lapel. I kept my shoulders square chin-level posture like a metronome. Through the blinds, the street lamps threw bars across the floor, and each shadow looked like a closed door. Neighbors walked dogs. A radio whispered baseball. I clicked my pen, noted the time, and wrote the terminal ID from memory. The tiny fact I knew someone would try to smear as confusion. Let them whisper. I would let the corridors of eyes do what corridors do, echo while I turned reflection into record. The projector's glare earlier had washed the auditorium in frost, but the QR it threw was clear in my photo. I pinch-zoomed and read the line that mattered: Legacy Consulting Sunset, a tidy umbrella for ending me. Below it, the list. First position, my name in bold, a lifetime rendered as bullet. I traced non-disparagement release of claims, no rehire, and the 24-hour window. I read each clause into the recorder, my voice level, my finger sliding along the screen like a ruler. Why is medical continuity bundled with silence? I asked and marked the breath on the tape that followed from the other end of the call. I'd worked long enough to recognize pressure dressed as policy. Outside the window, a cicada worked its own machinery. I let the sound mark the moment and kept reading. Her breath was close when she leaned in at the back row. Here we don't keep relics. I kept my face still. Tonight, I treat it as evidence. I pasted the screenshot of the list, added a timestamp, and noted the setting auditorium camera dome overhead. No adjectives, only the words as spoken slide title at the bottom edge. Contempt is loud, paper is heavy. The page filed behind the QR printout under a plain tab, Relics Witness Me. I added the projector's terminal ID, and the minute the slide advanced. If anyone later questioned memory, I would hand them a time and her sentence unvarnished. I wasn't chasing triumph. I was building a ledger of facts that would not blink under bright light. Screens were generous tonight, and I returned the favor by treating them cleanly. Each capture got 2 shots, a wide frame to show context and a close detail to show the hinge. I wrote the hash strings from my capture app into the margins, then read them into the recorder so there would be sound to match the ink. On my phone, I drafted an email to outside counsel subject line, preservation notice, internal finance, access discrepancies. I listed the sources: ledger exports, Okta logs, door readers, slide deck, metadata, NDA with 24-hour clause. I did not accuse. I requested preservation polite for do not destroy. An envelope on my desk bore a label in my print: outside counsel hold to be filled in the morning if the ground did not firm. At 10:27, my phone brightened the paperwork with a square of light Velma. I answered and gave her the bones, not the blood count of transactions pattern of beneficiaries, mismatched device and door, times the NDA tethered to health coverage. She listened the way surgeons listen, no flinching, only sequence. When can you bring originals and copies? She asked. No speeches tomorrow, she added. Documents first. Noon, I said. Board counsel will sit in, she replied. Keep the language spare and the posture unchanged. Her steadiness slid into my shoulders. I hadn't realized how high they'd been. I wrote 12 Sauer on the index in pencil and set the phone down beside the proofs. I had a direction: noon, originals, copies, documents first. Calm. I cleared a corner of the counter and opened the pill organizer I refill on Sundays. Names of prescriptions line my fridge like family photos. Premiums do too. I spoke for the recorder because later I will want the steadiness of this voice coverage is not a prize for silence. It is a right I have paid for each month. I tucked a typed list of doctors and refill dates into the health folder and snapped it shut. This is why the timer matters, I said quietly. At 66, continuity is not an abstract noun. It is Tuesday morning and the medicine that keeps Tuesday ordinary. I won't be rushed. I set a 24-hour timer and named it what it is: HR written confirmation due. My next lines went into the recorder like a grocery list ink paper spare SD card. I saved the call file under a simple name I would recognize when nerves tried to blur: NDA Part 2. At midnight, I slide the notarized addendum on top. Tomorrow, it won't be a story. It will be a document. I breathe, then sleep. I arrived 10 minutes early because paper deserves room to breathe. The boardroom sat behind smoked glass, the downtown skyline ghosted across the table like a second agenda. Velma lifted a palm at the head of the table, and the room slowed to her tempo, measured unrushed. I set my clear sleeve so the raised notary seal faced the light. The imprint made a pale crescent. Marcia, outside counsel, laid down 2 pads labeled Facts and Requests. No small talk. Velma poured water and capped the carafe again, a signal that ceremony was over. At noon, the second hand kissed 12. I slid the sleeve forward with 2 fingers. Key-Person Addendum. I said not a flourish, but testimony. Marcia lifted a magnifier, studied the Harris County docket stamp, the notary commission, the founder's signature I could trace from memory. She flagged 3 clauses and read the operative one. Any material change to the key person's role requires board review with the key person present. Effective August 20, 2018, Marcia said, tapping the date. I nodded. No board review occurred Friday, I answered. No agenda item, no notice to the key person, me. I slid a 1-page timeline across the glass, my advisory hours prior approvals, and a calendar screen print showing Friday's blank slot where such an item would belong. The ink wasn't angry. It was orderly. Terms, not tears, Velma said. The floor steadied. Marcia drew the timeline nearer. Procedural, not sentimental, she added, and the procedure wasn't followed. Now the map needed roads. I opened my index sheet, the one that stitched yesterday to the months behind it. Column 1, the QR restructuring slide and live endpoint captured at 9:08 a.m. Column 2, Okta and door logs from yesterday, my badge present, while a different workstation IP authorized actions under another person's credentials. Column 3, the ledger, 23 transfers in 6 months, rising from petty cash scale to yesterday's $50,000. I circled 3 entries matching prior board offsites. Marcia bracketed the page and wrote a simple sign, breach plus anomalies valid termination. Source for each, she asked. Finance GL export timestamped, Okta device history, door access report, QR slide pull, all printed last night and this morning. Hashes in margins. I let the evidence keep its own grammar. She tapped the corner with a felt tip, state the chain. I did system method time until the cadence felt like a metronome. My voice stayed level. When she finished her checks, she initialed each corner Ink like small anchors. Counsel's instruction, she said to the room, no words without paper. It was already my rule. We packed the binder together. Originals on the left behind a tamper strip, copies to the right index up front, hash notes in a clear pocket. The board secretary dated the custody form. I signed then, Velma, then Marcia. Red seals crossed the spine. The label read, COC 0916, start 1234 handlers listed, destination board council vault. The lid clicked shut with a sound that felt like a promise. Marcia drafted a short notice while the seals cured. Pending legal review, all employment status actions are stayed, she dictated. She asked HR to wait outside. Sherry stepped in just far enough to initial receipt, then stepped back. Velma added one more line. No access revocations, IT or physical until counsel completes verification. It wasn't mercy, it was due process. I kept my duplicate set in a separate case on my lap. I did not hand over any sole original, not because I mistrusted these women, but because paper takes the shape of the hands that hold it. Mine were steady. You've done enough, Velma said. Let the paper carry it. I felt an inch taller without moving. Marcia sent a calendar invite that appeared on the wall screen closed session, 2:00 p.m. interim measures and Proxy. I capped my pen and slid the clear sleeve empty now back into my bag. The skyline on the glass table no longer looked like a second agenda. Outside the corridor hummed neutral. I passed the carafe still capped and the clock still honest. In the elevator, I watched the floor numbers climb and thought about the first rule my husband taught our son. When you borrow a tool, return it clean. People borrow authority all the time through marriage title or someone else's work. Returning it clean means you leave the surface better than you found it. The addendum was our cloth. Today, we wiped. At 1:10, I was already in the lobby duplicate binder, clasped shut, phone on silent, so the room upstairs could hear itself think. A younger employee hurried past, then slowed to meet my eyes. No words, just a small nod like a seal pressed into wax. I nodded back. I didn't rehearse speeches on the drive home. I rehearsed the order of pages, addendum, timeline logs, ledger slide. Order matters. Stories wander, documents stack. In my kitchen, I set the duplicate on the table and checked the tamper edges in my mind the way a mother checks for a blanket's corners in the dark. Everything was tucked so. My calendar chimed, "Closed session 2 hours." I set a glass of water down without drinking. I save rituals for after the work, not before. I stood for one long breath, palms on the table, then lifted the binder with both hands as if weight were respect. At 2:10 p.m., the doors close for a vote, and for once I don't need to speak. My addendum will... At 1:55, the doors sealed with a soft magnetic thud, and the red in-session light washed the corridor's chatter out of reach. Phones went into lock pouches. The secretary started a wall timer. I took the chair against that glass, my duplicate binder resting flat across my knees. No throat clearing, no speech. Paper was my only voice, and it had spoken an hour ago. Velma sat 3 seats from the head pen capped. Counsel opened a slim folder and nodded to the secretary. Shayna held the far end, present, silent. I kept my eyes on the custody number. If I felt anything, I tightened the binder strap and let it pass. Ground rules arrived without drama. Counsel outlined the scope in a clean courtroom cadence. This session was for procedure and interim governance, not personality. The Key-Person Addendum was in the sealed binder. Chain of custody noted, the agenda limited. "We will not argue character," Marcia said. "We will address compliance." I breathed grateful for nouns over adjectives. The secretary dimmed the lights a shade and brought up the Proxy dashboard. Gray tiles waited. "Confirm beneficial owners," Velma said, and the list scrolled funds, trusts one long-held family account with a familiar street address. A late proxy hit Counsel's inbox. The secretary verified signatures and slotted it in. I said nothing, tracing the slow migration of gray to tentative green. A motion appeared on the screen. Pause the CEO transition. Appoint an interim governance committee. Reinstate my procedural status per the addendum until review. Bar further non-routine movements of assets without dual sign-off from finance and counsel. No flourish, just boxes to check. Velma asked for clarifications. Counsel answered in dates and clauses. My palms cooled. The room shifted from theater to audit. "Call the question," someone said. The first boxes turned 2 stayed blank abstentions. 3 settled on no. I counted ahead the way mothers do through flu nights. Green began to string together. Halfway came and went, then the late proxy clicked into the ledger and the progress bar crossed the faint line that draws a breath from a room. A tiny release escaped me. I tightened the strap again and kept my face neutral. Let the instruments play. I would not hum along. Counsel summarized without flourish. The motion carried. Interim measures were in effect. She had the secretary finalize minutes, then turned to practicalities. Notify banks, she said, of the dual authorization requirement. Notify HR of the stay on any changes to access and employment status pending review. Forensic audit to commence on finance and identity logs. No one argued. Process carried the heat away. The secretary read the roll of ayes and nays for the record. I wrote COC 0916 again where I could see it easily if my hands started to shake. They didn't. Velma tapped her capped pen, once the old signal to move on. I remembered those meetings and how often paper had spared us from the damage of temperament. Orders took shape that actually mattered. A freeze on non-routine transfers, a 2-signature rule for larger vendor payments, scheduled interviews for custodians of the systems whose logs I had printed last night, a town hall the next morning with a narrow disclosure process, underway interim guardrails, respect for people. I appreciated the phrase. It spared the decent and warned the careless. When the red light over the door finally shifted to amber, we rose without scraping chairs. Counsel took the sealed binder for the vault. I held my duplicate like a hymnal. In the atrium beyond the conference suite, a single microphone waited on a small riser. Velma glanced at it, then at me. "If you speak," she murmured one sentence. I slid a blank index card from my pocket. I didn't need ink to say what a document already had. The glass wall held my reflection. The visitor sticker. From yesterday gone, my badge still coiled in my purse like a relic of a relic. The green bar held on the dashboard in my memory, steady as a heartbeat. We filed past the secretary's desk. The minutes template glowed on her screen, neat and bloodless. I signed for my copy set and thanked her. She met my eyes the way people do when they've seen a kindness they can't name. The door to the atrium opened on a blow of cooler air and the faint sound of building life resuming. I stood at the edge of the riser, hand on the rail. On the other side, a cluster of staff had paused. The morning guard looked over, trying to place me. I thought of the timers running at home, the printer that had eaten a ream to give me a night's worth of spine, the pill box waiting on the counter as an argument for carefulness. A sentence Velma had said, not a speech. I paused at the threshold and let the hum of the building settle into a low, workable rhythm. In the founder's years, when tempers ran fast, he used to say paper is what remains when voices forget themselves. I am 66. I have learned the mercy of records and the dignity of waiting for a clock to strike. There were people out there who wanted a scene or a scrap of it to carry back to desks and chats, but I didn't come for applause or fire. I came to keep the rails on, make sure the checks and the medicine continue, and to show my son, if he ever asks, that a calm line holds when the loud ones break. The green bar held. The only thing left between me and the atrium was one sentence. I stepped to the atrium mic with my duplicate binder closed and my breath steady. The grill was cold against the single sentence I had carried like a small stone all day. Procedural protections have been invoked. Interim measures are in effect. Operations continue, facts are with counsel. No names, no glares, no story time. I pressed the binder strap, flat nodded to the secretary for the minutes, and walked off the circle of light without looking up to the mezzanine. The absence of noise traveled further than applause. Heads tipped toward phones, rumor heat, cooling by degrees. Someone started to lift a hand as if to ask a question, then thought better and lowered it. The blank index card I had kept as a compass went to the secretary's folder, unsigned and unnecessary. If Shayna watched from the rail, the glass kept our eyes from meeting. I kept moving paper first, then air. Behind the conference glass, language turned into orders. Marcia dictated short messages while the secretary typed interim status. Dual approvals for payments. A forensic window opened at dawn. My job was a straight back and a clean eye. I read quietly for typos, checked timestamps against Central, and pointed to a stray comma like it mattered, which it did, because commas turn into loopholes if you let them. We put the bank on speaker. Marcia introduced herself and cited the vote. I supplied account IDs and the interim order numbers. The compliance manager's voice was even the way a level sits on a plank. He asked for recent ACH and SWIFT activity beneficiaries and thresholds. I slid the yellow marked ledger deltas across the table and said the $50,000 transfer allowed once with the date. The sound of money stopping is not a thunk. It is an email tone and a recorded case number. Controls engaged one by one, non-routine transfers, frozen, named beneficiaries flagged, overrides requiring a council code, manual reviews set to 24 hours. I wrote the case number twice in my notebook, then spoke it into the recorder so the ink and the audio would match. The room did not cheer. It breathed. Inside our own walls, the cascade followed. Accounts payable received a temporary hold on new vendors. Account changes needed a second set of hands. Exceptions lined up in a queue pointed to council. I initialed beside each action for receipt. Not approval authority belonged to the board, and I intended to keep it there. The work felt like laying sandbags against a slow, patient flood. What employees needed was the right amount of truth. A trimmed notice went live on the intranet operations table. No speculation. Compliance review scheduled. Town hall at 10. I asked for one line added and watched it stay bolded. After refresh, respect for tenure and process is expected. Not a speech, just a standard written where gossip usually wins. We set tomorrow's pull before the hallway clocks could get smug. Okta door cameras finance exports at 8:30. Security to coordinate device retrieval from named parties. A short list of serial numbers tucked behind the agenda. I closed my binder and let out one long exhale that nobody needed to witness. Paper travels best when lungs do not. At the threshold, I looked back once. The atrium was already returning to fluorescent ordinary, the way a pond goes still after a stone disappears. The one sentence had done its work. Now the numbers would do theirs. I checked the timer on my phone, listened to its silent countdown, and tucked the recorder into the side pocket of my bag. On the whiteboard, Marcia drew a clean box around 3 essentials, who may authorize how exceptions get logged and where the audit sits. We agreed on names to own each step for the next 24 hours. I volunteered for none of them. My part was evidence shepherd, not hero. I photographed the board at a slant so the room's clock landed in the frame, then sent the image to my chain 09-16 folder. Habit makes dignity feel like muscle. My phone buzzed with replies to the earlier HR email words like reviewing as discussed and per policy. I forwarded each to myself again, tagging the subject lines with the hour 3:28, 3:41, 3:47. Their vagueness was a kind of weather report. You pack a coat, you don't curse the rain. I added a line to my notebook. No speech without documents ever. Velma paused at the door long enough to meet my eye. Town hall script stays narrow, she said. If anyone asks you for color, you point to counsel. I told her I had one sentence left in me for the rest of the day and that I had already used it. She smiled the way a person does when a load shifts off their shoulders, but the work remains to be hauled. We both prefer weight to drama. By the time the bank's confirmation letter hit the inbox with its neat paragraph about controls and monitoring, the building seemed to settle like a car that finally finds the lane after a rough merge. The secretary printed 2 copies. I initialed the footer next to the case number so no one could later pretend a different document had carried the day. Across the glass, the mezzanine was a blur of peep. At 8:30, sharp security would collect the devices if the doors let them in. I arrived before the sweep, sitting at the edge of the security war room where the glass showed our reflections and the clock's second hand. At 8:15, Ramirez checked his list, and at 8:29, the first door readers blinked green for the team. Keisha rolled in a cart with anti-static bags and barcode stickers, quiet as a nurse. My job was not to hurry anyone. I logged time suite and handler in my notebook, the same neat hand I used when I built this company's operations. Workstations went black, phones slid into sleeves, assigned laptops, lost their power cords, and were sealed. I kept my badge coiled in my palm like a small snake that had learned to stop biting. At 8:30 on the dot, the first signature met the first seal. Keisha angled a monitor toward me and opened the SOC console. Under Email Gateway, a new rule hung like a cobweb auto-forward alerts to an external alias created after hours. She drilled to creation time and IP. 2 hops that did not fit our normal pattern, blinked on the map, one in a coffee shop corridor downtown, one from a residential node near the Beltway. I wrote the times the rule named the alias string and the admin who had the finger on the button. No commentary, just ink. Keisha nodded once and captured a snapshot of the rule list, then another of the GeoIP pins. The fan in the console case hummed as if it too understood what it meant. Buried deeper in the pull, Keisha found a folder with a name that looked like a typo and a timestamp that was not. Inside sat an attached voice memo, 10 seconds long, created during yesterday's meeting window. We played only the start through low speakers. Legacy's done moved the last batch before noon. The rest we did not need to hear. I had heard enough versions of that sentence to recognize the gate. Keisha generated the hash values. I wrote them beside the path, then recorded them aloud into my pocket recorder. The waveform trembled on the screen, a thin winter branch in the wind. Marcia stood behind us and said simply, "Stop at 10, log it." So we did with gloves and witness initials, as if the sound itself might smear if handled carelessly. Marcia dictated each line for the evidence log, artifact source system, handler hash time captured, time sealed. Ramirez photographed every bag before the seal tightened. I initialed along the margin and printed my name in block letters the way nurses do when there can be no mistake. We spoke in nouns and numbers, no adjectives. A lawful room doesn't need them. Across the glass, the sun caught a corner of the binder where I had written yesterday's case number twice. The desk sweep moved to the auxiliary printer nook, a place people forget because it only speaks when jammed. Ramirez lifted a ceiling tile with 2 fingers and exhaled. A silver ultralight lay face down on the grid, its ports taped the kind of machine that hides in plain office air. Under a drawer lip electrician's tape held a thumb drive the size of a mint. Neither device sat on inventory. Keisha docked the laptop through a right blocker, eyes flat with concentration. On boot, the image presented a mirrored credential cache, familiar usernames in an unfamiliar order session, tokens that did not age out when they should. It looked like someone had built themselves a parallel hallway to walk our systems without opening the front door. I felt anger, but I marked times instead. The thumb drive imaged cleanly. Its directory tree repeated the same pattern with smaller teeth. Ramirez held the anti-static sleeve up so the seal number faced my notes, and I wrote that down too. Marcia's hand hovered over the trackpad without touching it. "No live logins," she said. "Image only." We generated hashes for the drive images, printed the strings, and taped them to the evidence sleeves. The originals went into red tamper bags, the copies onto encrypted storage for counsel. I countersigned the custody labels and slid copies into my binder pocket marked S12. Ramirez labeled the ceiling tile photo and closed the grid with the same care he would use for a skylight. The room settled into the sound of pens and timestamps. Asha arrived at 10 with a manila envelope held to her chest like a textbook. She's the junior accountant who once squeezed my hand in the auditorium and then let go when she saw the visitor sticker. Today, she had a variance report she drafted last month and never sent. 2 small transfers on her sheet matched the first anomalies I had starred timing amounts and vendor fragments that looked like cousins. Her eyes were steady and a little frightened. I asked for a short witness note with dates only, no opinions, and handed her a printed template. She wrote quickly, signed, and dated it. I clipped it to the variance and logged receipt at 10:17. By 11, our artifacts had names, hashes and seals, and the chain of custody sat complete on the table. Marcia scheduled a noon council huddle with Velma and outside investigators. She looked at me over the rims of her glasses. "Paper first," she said, "then the rest." I closed my notebook on a single line I had underlined twice. Voice memo plus shadow device equals charges. The hallway outside was bright as a courtroom step, and I was ready to walk it. Counsel's room smelled like coffee and photocopier heat, the kind that curls paper at the corners. I kept my duplicate binder shut and listened while Marcia clicked through the deck, referral to authorities recommended. Each slide was clean artifact name, hash string, custodian. Keisha's SOC pull sat beside Ramirez's photos of tamper seals. The voice memo title was reduced to a timestamp and 10 lawful seconds. Velma watched the room like a metronome, steadying the pace with a nod when people reacted. We built packets, not speeches. Marcia handed me a blue cover sheet, referral financial crimes, and I proofed dates initials and the index order. The chain of custody logs went first, then screenshots, then image manifests for the shadow laptop and its thumb drive. "Keep the memo excerpt tight," Marcia said. 10 seconds stayed 10 seconds. I signed the transmittal inventory slow enough for the ink to dry before I lifted my hand. Quiet power lives in friction you can audit. Paper met law at 1:13. Marcia put the Harris County DA on speaker. I read the case caption off the letterhead. The intake officer's voice was measured the way people sound when they know calls are recorded. We received an intake number and a secure upload link. Marcia called the bank's compliance desk, next appended our internal case to theirs, and asked for an email confirming freeze scope and review window. I spoke the 2 numbers into my recorder, then wrote them twice in my notebook. Numbers. In the elevator corridor, Sherry stepped out from the HR suite with a beige folder and the tone reserved for unpleasant errands. We still need your signature on the separation package and your key fob today. The elevator numbers ticked down and up like a clock with heart trouble. I rested the binder strap in my palm. Employment status actions are stayed, I said, pending counsel's review. Sherry smiled like a helpful neighbor. Process requires I produce the stay in writing the memo from yesterday with board minutes cited time-stamped and initialed by the secretary. This, I said, is the process. Marcia reached us at the last word calm as a courthouse hallway. She referenced the custody, seals, and interim orders. Sherry read the header, took the copy, and stepped back into the suite. We'll coordinate with counsel, she said, which is HR for not today. Back in counsel's room, we uploaded the packet through the portal. The progress bar crawled stopped at 99 decided to be brave and clicked to complete. A confirmation code landed in Marcia's inbox. She called the corporate insurer to flag a potential fidelity claim and to place a legal hold on relevant systems. I wrote the claim number below the DA intake and the bank case, then spoke all three into the recorder. If I learned anything these last 2 days, it's that saying numbers out loud, anch. Before we left the floor, Marcia printed 2 cover letters on letterhead for physical files and asked the secretary to prepare certified mailers in case the portal stalled. I labeled the envelopes with my block letters, DA Bank Insurer, and wrote the date across the back flap like a quiet seal. Ramirez dropped off an updated device list. Keisha emailed an addendum noting the auto-forward rules and GeoIP anomalies with their exact creation times. I read each timestamp aloud and checked it against our TE. Internal notices went out next, retention hold on finance, Okta and door cameras. No deletions, no device wipes, no changes to rules or profiles without counsel's written approval. A second message set tomorrow's town hall for 10 o'clock with limited Q&A. I asked for one line more plain as a stop sign. Respect for tenure and process is expected. Marcia read it once, then left it in. On the way down, I scanned tomorrow's calendar on my phone forensics at 8:30 council, at 9:30 town hall, at 10 sharp. I added one private reminder at noon, call the pharmacy to verify refills haven't been interrupted. I would not barter health for discretion. Not now, not ever. Velma caught my eye at the doorway. Tomorrow, she said, fax only. I slid an empty index card into my jacket pocket and closed the binder. I didn't need words on the card. I needed the posture of someone who would not be stampeded. The lobby reflected back a woman who had been labeled visitor on Monday. Today the sticker was gone. The discipline stayed. On the lobby wall afternoon, sun turned the glass softly gold. I read the case numbers again, slow this time, letting cadence steady my hands. Houston breathes in heat and hum, but paper is cool. It asks only for date signatures and the nerve to show up. I sat on the lobby bench and listened to the building. Phones buzzed in pockets. Doors sighed. A courier cart rattled across the marble with a stack of copy paper that looked ready to stop a door or start a case. I checked the recorder's file names, DA Intake 1258, Bank Case 106, Insurer Claim 122. I pressed the red dot again and described the day in Nouns Packet Portal stay numbers, upload, hold. Verbs would come tomorrow. Today belonged to documents. The elevator opened and closed each visit, a little mirror that refused to keep a secret. I stood smooth the edge of the blue cover sheet and walked toward the exit. Tomorrow at 10 they would bring their questions. I would bring silence paper and one sentence. I arrived 15 minutes early with Velma and Marcia. The auditorium lights were up, the clock stubborn at 9:45, the lectern lamp a small halo on wood. 2 stools waited off to the side like patient ushers. I set a blank index card on the lectern and laid my hand flat beside it. No speech today, just working air. The timer app on the front row tablet mirrored 10 o'clock in silent digits. I breathed once the way nurses teach, before a blood draw, then checked my binder strap. It was shut. Facts first, feelings folded. When the staff filed in, I kept my eyes level the way you do when your name has been a rumor and you won't donate words to it. At 10 sharp, I lifted the mic and gave 3 rules, 1 line each. Operations are stable. Legal holds are active. Respect is not optional. I let each sentence breathe, then lowered the mic and looked to Velma. She took a stool and framed the scope, continuity, and conduct. No speculation, no naming targets, no theater. Marcia sat stage left with a tablet prepared to correct anything that wandered into privilege. The room shifted from rumor to work. I kept the index card blank under my palm as if it were a quiet agreement we will stay with facts and go home on time. The clock on lectern ticked to 10:01. I nodded to the ushers and to the note-taker to mark each question as it came. Okay. Hands rose. A payroll clerk asked if Friday deposits would hit. I answered in cadence. Yes, payroll is funded. Dual approvals are in place. If your bank flags a delay, email the address on the slide. A project manager asked about vendor checks. Same rhythm invoices are processed. Non-routine payments require council code. The APQ shows dates on the portal. A developer asked whether systems would throttle. I said the controls are narrow and the goal is continuity. I kept each answer to 3 sentences, the fact the interim control the path for help. After a few rounds, the murmurs lowered. People wrote, not speculated. The note-taker tapped timestamps. I could feel the room settle into work the way a ship finds center water. The back row stopped shadow texting. The timer slid to 19. From the back row, a senior manager stood shoulders squared to make a point. He asked if legacy leadership was blocking progress, if my presence meant the company would live in the past. I let my jaw stay still. Procedures were breached. Evidence preserved. Work continues. Velma added, level and dry governance is not a feeling. It is about daylight. Heads turned toward him, then forward again. The mic moved on. I checked the timer, 13 minutes. A woman from operations asked about travel approvals. I answered in cadence and pointed to the exception queue. A hardware question followed. Same rhythm. Paths beat theories. The room held. Okay, the rear wall screens flickered, then steadied on a red banner from the SOC. An attempted login pinged the system source MAC, matched the shadow laptop found yesterday geolocated to the parking garage. Timestamp 10:42. The inhale moved through the seats like a tide. I didn't look at the mezzanine or speak. I nodded to Marcia and let the banner work. The room held. I kept my palm on the card and waited for process to stand up. The alert text was plain device ID ending 7A admin attempt blocked by policy. Keisha's name sat in the corner with a case number I already knew by heart. A whisper rose from row 3 and died. I stepped back so the banner owned the wall and the point. Systems don't gossip, they log. Still. Ramirez stood from the side wall with 2 officers and moved toward the doors without hurry. Marcia took the mic long enough to read the line from the interim order security may interdict devices tied to flagged access and suspend any party pending review. No names. No drama. The audience stayed seated. The secretary logged the time. I said nothing. On Marcia's tablet, 2 new checks appeared. Garage sweep initiated custody labels prepared. A minute later, a text buzzed my phone. In motion. We waited. I watched the clock tip to 10:44. Procedure protects when ego wants a stage. That was enough for today. The card stayed blank under my palm. When the banner dimmed, I returned to cadence. Payroll is funded, vendors will clear through dual sign-off, and notes from this session will post by 2. I thanked the room for keeping the company whole while adults handle the law. A hand asked if travel would stall. I said approvals continue with council codes. If your trip protects revenue or safety, it will move. No speeches, no heat, just work in daylight. Another voice asked about reviews. We paused them a week. I kept answers short and in plain language. The note-taker captured every timestamp, and the ushers gathered unused question cards. We were done spending fear. It was 11 off stage. As the last row stood, my phone buzzed. Ramirez device secured, person of interest escorted, access suspended pending counsel. I exhaled once, not relief so much as alignment. Paper won again. We stepped into the hall where badge readers blinked their small truths in green and red. I logged the case number in my notebook and closed it on the line. We had kept our word to the room. Questions, not drama. Velma touched the binder strap and nodded toward the elevators. Building exhaled now. Outside the auditorium, a badge reader blinked red, and for the first time since Monday, the building felt honest. The security report blinked red at noon, a stack of paper that didn't raise its voice but changed the room. Ramirez slid the packet onto Council's table, the SOC alert from the town hall, the garage, MAC at 10:39, and the prior match to the shadow laptop we bagged. A printed still lay on top, only a sleeve and a badge angled toward the reader, enough for time and place. Case numbers marched down the margin. I read, not react. My hand stayed on the binder, steady as a metronome. When a thing is true, it doesn't need volume. It needs a timestamp and a witness. We had both. Keisha followed with a correlation sheet that looked like a quilt door, reads access point handshakes, Wi-Fi associations, and the device serial captured during right-blocked imaging. Marcia circled the overlap windows in blue until the pattern was impossible to ignore. The line that mattered sat by itself near the bottom, the kind of sentence that could fit on my blank card, authorized by Shayna's personal badge. I underlined it once with a slow stroke and set the pen down. Silence did the rest. It felt like the moment of fever breaks, not triumph, just clarity returning to the room. Velma convened an emergency huddle in the board suite. Doors shut, phone sealed, counsel at the head. Marcia read the motion in a tone that could level a table place. Shayna on paid administrative leave, revoke digital access, hold credentials, schedule an interview with counsel present, and preserve devices under chain of custody. The vote moved like a careful tide. Ayes to, abstains carried. The green bar crossed the line and stayed there. I kept my hands flat on the binder and let the light on the minutes template do the speaking. No one cheered. We wrote it down because writing is how truth survives the afternoon. HR served the notice without adjectives. Sherry read from a script while Marcia watched the commas and the scope lines. Security collected the badge phone and laptop. Seals clicked shut like buckles on a life vest. Receipt signatures went on the line and the envelope marked administrative leave disappeared into custody. I neither watched nor spoke. Some moments are less about a person leaving a room and more about a policy entering it. The hallway sounded wider when the door closed, less echo, more breath. Back in the board suite, we rewired the week. The motion reaffirm interim governance appoint the operations lead as acting COO for day-to-day authority, rescind my termination pending review, and seat me formally as advisor to the interim committee. Another vote, another green bar, another line in the minutes that would outlast today's nerves. An updated org chart replaced rumor with rectangles. Responsibility boxes found owners again. A notification template waited for names and timestamps. Marcia slid me a single signature advisory letter. I signed it with a steady hand and wrote the time in my notebook for the chain. Law knocked softly a half hour later. The DA liaison confirmed our referral intake and requested interview windows plus clean copies of the artifacts from last night. A preservation letter would go to third parties. Marcia set holds on the calendar while I boxed the reference code twice in my notebook and read it into my recorder time source code handler. Nothing dramatic, just bricks set into place along a path we could walk tomorrow with our eyes open. Velma asked counsel to prepare a summary for the insurer as well, and the secretary began a neat list of exhibits that would travel with us. Marcia looped in bank compliance to append our internal case to theirs. The manager on the line confirmed the freeze and added a second control. Any attempt to alter beneficiary data would trigger a manual callback to counsel before release. I wrote the new case suffix beside the first and drew a box around both, then photographed the page for my own log. Process is a kind of kindness it keeps people from improvising when nerves ask them to do something foolish. My phone lit with Mitchell's name, the kind of gray that still finds a mother no matter how many signatures cover a day. "Are you okay?" he typed. "Fax only." I answered interim orders stand administrative leave, issued operations steady. He wrote back, coming by tonight. I looked at the words as if they were a door I wasn't sure I could unlock. Bring nothing but truth. I typed, then turned the phone face down and felt the edge of the binder under my palm. Family is a ledger you reconcile slowly, line by line, without erasing the messy entries that got you here. OK, Counsel's inbox filled with deposition outlines and document request lists for the morning. I sorted them by heading Slate exhibit tabs into place and stacked the packet with my index card still blank on top. The quiet felt earned, not empty. Outside the window, Houston heat lay on Westheimer like a hand pressing creases into a shirt. Inside, the air held steady at 72 and the clock knifed toward 3. We would spend the evening packing truth in boxes that close. In the morning, we would open them, swear to them, and let the record do what voices couldn't. I labeled a folder Witness Asha and slid her report under the exhibit tab bridge between numbers and names. Across the hall, the building settled into its late afternoon hum, the sound of printers, not rumors. Now. By morning, there would be oaths, and paper would speak louder than anyone's name. I sat opposite the witness table at 8:59. The court reporter opened her steno machine and tested a string of names, the soft clatter like rain on glass. Marcia stacked our tabs in calm order. S11, the voice memo. S12, the shadow device. S16, the alert digest. Velma stood by the door, listening the way a good lighthouse watches weather steady without drama. The room smelled of coffee and new paper. My blank index card lay face down beside a small recorder whose red dot meant memory, not theater. No speeches today. Only exhibits time and the patience to let them talk. I aligned the tabs and let my breath follow the clock's ticks. Sherry went first. She raised her hand, swore, and settled into the narrow chair as the reporter stamped the header with 9:06 a.m. Marcia kept the lane's clean access policies, who drafted the separation packet, why the timing was marked today, and who said it could not wait. Sherry said process more than once and leadership direction once more, but no names passed her lips. I underlined verbs, not adjectives. We were building rails, not a bonfire, and rails carry weight longer. The record would show steps, not adjectives, and steps hold up in storms. We were not hunting villains. We were naming time's tools doors. Ops Tech Blake sat next. Under oath, he said the auto-forward rule in our mail system, the one that bled finance alerts to an external alias, was requested after hours Monday by finance leadership. He said it as if rooms and people would obediently appear behind the sentence. Marcia slid 2 printouts in silence, a door cam still and the evening badge log. Between 6 and 11, only janitorial badges scanned. No Blake, no leadership. A red circle around the no-entry window sat on the page like a clock with missing hands. Blake looked at his own acknowledgement signature, then at the still. The room quieted the way truth quiets people who prefer noise. Facts travel better than rumors. The pages carried them. Keisha brought in the Wi-Fi handshake report. The Shadow laptop's Mac lit the network at 7:58 p.m. Monday, 2 floors below the boardroom. Calendar screenshots showed a vendor sync for that hour, but no room booked and no organizer listed. Under oath, Blake amended his story he had joined a screen share, not an in-person request. I wrote one line in my notebook screen share authorization and drew a small box around it. Good policy exists for the moments when convenience pretends to be permission. It spared us haste. The correction was small in words and huge in consequence. Policy had a spine. We let it stand. Then the vendor got a face. Marcia marked the next exhibit, Lone Star Integrations LLC vendor registration, and W9. The Texas SOS printout gave an address that cross-referenced to a mid-rise condo lease. The tenant, Marcus W., a personal associate we knew by sight if not by title. The bank beneficiary trail we flagged with compliance on Tuesday threaded neatly to the same routing, the same account. We did not say the word shell. We did not need to. The room's temperature seemed to step back a degree. Someone shifted a pen. I underlined Marcus W. once slowly enough to hear the paper. Vindication isn't heat, it's a level surface returning under your feet. Patterns are shy until you draw the lines between them, then they stop pretending. Nobody raised a voice. Nobody had to where choices stay. The paper kept moving. Marcia introduced a draft power of attorney as the next exhibit, temporary financial oversight, dated the morning I was publicly fired. The notary block stood empty. An email thread 18 minutes apart pressed a recipient to swing by HR for signatures between the town hall invite and the QR slide. The draft proposed broad authority to reassign vendor approvals. I breathed once slow and looked only at the fields, names, dates, blanks. Paper can be a lever or a weapon. It depends on who signs and who is kept in the hallway. I logged it to the packet list, calm as breath. The intake code would carry the weight. Later. Counsel played chess, not checkers. On the record, Marcia stated a supplemental referral to the DA adding the shell linkage and the attempted POA leverage. She requested written statements from Blake and Sherry by 5 p.m. and preservation notices to the condo manager and the bank. I signed the exhibit inventory with small square letters and initialed the chain of custody margin. No speeches, just the slow, lawful turn of a key. Outside the window, clouds gathered like witnesses who had finally been invited to sit down. My pulse slowed. Paper at last caught up with the week. Velma closed the door softly and said the afternoon board brief was moved up. Bank compliance would attend. I flipped my index card. The front was still blank, and that was the point. Facts first, then families. By mid-afternoon, the facts would sit where votes happen, and the question would not be who speaks loudest, but who signs. 2 chairs sat empty when the boardroom doors shut at 2:05. The CEO's seat stayed a pale square on the glossy table as if a picture frame had been lifted and left its ghost. Velma opened with a spine of facts contradictions, from the depositions, the shadow laptop, and thumb drive, the auto-forward rules, the vendor address tied to a condo, and the blank notary block on the power of attorney draft. Marcia's summary fit on one page. I kept my hands flat on my duplicate binder and let my breathing set the rhythm paper first, then anything else. The motion read itself, for cause not as a shout, but as elements breach of procedure, misuse of access conflict through a shell. Clawbacks authorized. Litigation holds on every relevant device and inbox. Authority to pursue the vendor in civil court. The vote rolled in a clean bar from gray to green. The secretary's adopted stamp landed like a gavel that didn't need noise. I boxed the resolution number. Bank compliance and the insurer joined by speaker. The voice on the line was warm, stone, steady, careful. A fidelity advance would bridge what had leaked. Payroll would run on time. 401k contributions and health premiums were ring-fenced. Vendor lists would be scrubbed before any release. Employees first, the manager said. I circled the words. The DA liaison followed charges drafted. A voluntary surrender window set for early evening at the intake center. If the hour passed, a warrant would issue. No cameras, no statements. We were not staging a lesson. We were keeping faith with a system that prefers paper to microphones. Velma nodded once. Marcia answered, received. I closed my binder and felt its weight become reasonable again, heavy but proportionate to the truth it carried. We wrote to our house, our people. Operation steady. Benefits protected. Interim governance reaffirmed. Dual approvals on payments. Forensic review ongoing. I kept one line that had steadied the building all week. Respect is not optional. I added another thank you for building while adults handle the law. The secretary posted the message. Replies, stacked thumbs, a few hearts, the digital equivalent of shoulders releasing an inch. At 5:55, I crossed the lobby anteroom. Counsel and security turned toward the garage to meet the intake window. There were no reporters. There were only employees holding doors for one another desktops, waking a coat folded over an arm because work continues in ordinary ways, even when a week tries to tilt the floor. The badge reader blinked amber to green. That little change felt like a prayer, said without saying the word. Evening put a soft edge on the heights. My bungalow waited the way old houses wait, quiet but with muscle memory for gatherings. Mitchell parked at the curb and walked up carrying a paper bag. Soup. He set it on the counter and slid an envelope toward me. "I wrote this," he said, "but I don't think I should read it at you." We sat at the kitchen table, steam curling from the bowls, and used plain language, because plain language saves families. He told me what he had believed, what he had let hurry drown out what he saw when the facts finally stood up taller than the story he'd been handed. "Tell me the rules," he said. "I'll keep them." Rule 1, I said, respect isn't optional. Not for titles, not for elders, not for the truth when it arrives on paper. He nodded. Rule 2, ask, don't assume, I said. If something doesn't fit, bring me the mismatch before you bring me the verdict. He breathed out through his nose, boy and man layered together. Rule 3, choose repair over performance, I said. We are not props for each other's image. We are relatives. He laughed, not to escape, but to agree. We ate until the soup wasn't hot and the kitchen smelled like thyme and apologies. He stood, rinsed the bowls, dried them, put them back where they belonged. That small choreography counted. My phone buzzed. A single word from Marcia processed. Voluntary surrender complete. No spectacle. I set the phone face down and walked to the porch. The light above the steps was still on. I switched it to dusk to dawn, a promise the house could keep for me when I was tired. Mitchell joined me in the doorway and watched the slow parade of neighbors coming home, dogs, grocery bags, someone dragging a hose that refused to coil. I was wrong, he said. Not just in what I thought, in how sure I was about it. Certainty is a loud guest, I said. You're allowed to show at the door. He nodded toward the light. You're keeping that on, I am, I said. It's not a beacon for anybody who won't earn the step. It's a reminder that this house knows the difference between welcome and surrender. He asked if I forgave him. I said yes, and that forgiveness is a road, not a stamp. He said he could walk. I believed him because his hands were empty and his listening was full. I locked the deadbolt not because I was afraid, but because peace deserves a frame. I opened my notebook and wrote the date, the resolution numbers, the claim codes, the word from the DA, and 3 family rules on one line, compact, legible, durable. Then I set the pen down and let the week set with it. There were no speeches to give, only a light to maintain, and a son to treat like a man who had found the right door and knocked. Some victories are loud. Ours signed in blue ink and glowed warm above my front steps. Yes, I'm 66, and here's what this week taught me. Quiet isn't weakness. It's a tool. Paper outlasts rumors. Boundaries protect love. If someone calls you a relic, let your records not your rage answer. At any age, you can choose dignity, document the truth, and rebuild without noise. What part of this story met you where you live? Workplace power, family repair, or both? Would you have handled the mic the same way? Tell me below. If this touched you, comment 1 or share where you're watching from. If it didn't, say why I'm listening. And if you want more true human stories, please subscribe to the channel.